Good evening. I'm happy to say welcome back to Oxygen to Lorelei. I think many of you have expected her badly to return, so here she is. But tonight we are going to cover a very hot topic, and this topic is about ethics in evangelism. Time and again we hear about an evangelist having been caught red-handed in an affair. We're not going to talk about such things. We are going to talk about evangelism as such. And my question is whether or not evangelism might involve in itself a break of ethics. And Lorelei, maybe it's going to be a surprise to some of our hearers and to some of our audience that to learn that you have a missionary experience. Mm-hmm. You have been in mission for 1 year.
I went to South Korea from October 2007 to November 2008. So I spent 1 full year living abroad.
Yeah, it was a missionary activity or related to mission?
Yeah, it was actually working for an English institute in Korea. It's the biggest English institute actually in the entire country of Korea, secular or religious, and it's owned by the Adventist Church. There's 41 branches of it, and so they have a high demand for English teachers who also teach religion classes. They teach a religion class every day, and then they have weekend religious activities that they participate in. So it was teacher / missionary, the title.
And so my understanding is that teaching is subordinated to evangelism. Like you do teaching in order to bring people to Jesus.
Right. So in this, it was actually a company that I worked for was primarily an English institute because English is in very high demand there. So they're very well known. They're a huge company. But yes, that's primarily what happens. You have maybe 6 or 7 hours a day where you teach English, and then you have that one religious class. So yes, officially it's mostly a teaching English experience, but it is a religious institution. So you have church activities, vespers, clubs, retreats, things that are religious oriented.
Which I think is not bad in itself.
Right.
Okay. So first let me ask you this question. What made you go there? What prompted you?
Well, after I graduated college in 2006, I thought I was going to take one professional route, and so I was lucky enough to get a job in this field, and it was a corporate immigration job. And I was kind of disillusioned with working in the corporate world, even though I thought it would be very different than it actually was. And so I kind of went through a period of, oh, did I do the right thing? Is this the right path I'm supposed to go on? And at that time, a friend of mine presented this opportunity. She couldn't go, but she was like, I think you would maybe be interested in this, seeing that you don't really enjoy your job. It's not really satisfying. So I said, why not?
So you were disappointed by corporate culture?
It was, yes. Primarily I wanted to do immigration because I thought it would help people. I thought it would be more contact with individuals, but I was pretty much sitting behind a computer and doing paperwork all day long. So there was no human contact.
So you went there for human contact, for a sense of purpose?
That's what I thought that my purpose was going to be, is to do immigration law. And I wanted to apply to law school afterwards, but after working there, I realized for my temperament, it's not the right place.
It's not for you.
Yeah.
Okay, so you went to Korea to find purpose in life, to escape corporate culture, yeah, and maybe you found some of the corporate culture there too, you know, to do something for Jesus. So, did religion or any kind of religious motivation play any role in your decision?
I think it was principally this religious motivating factor. I did pray about it a lot at that time, with my friend too. We both wanted to do it, and I felt compelled to do this. And although my experience was a unique one where I came away with maybe a different perspective, I feel like I'm glad that I went through it because it has, in a way, strengthened my faith in a different way.
In a different way.
In a different type of way. But it was
I understand what
primarily
you mean,
religious. It was primarily, at that time, maybe a more naive understanding of religion and purpose. But yes.
Okay, tell us something about your experience in Korea. First, did it meet your expectation? Were you disappointed? What new things you learned about human nature, about the nature of evangelism? Just tell us about your experience there.
All in all, my personal experience, I would say, was positive in terms of I met very fascinating, wonderful people that I built lifelong relationships with. I was exposed to a culture which I have nothing but respect for the Korean culture. They are the most hospitable, wonderful people. I've always felt welcome there, and I learned a lot of things. In terms of my experience as a missionary, that was something that was a little bit strange for me because the fact that this missionary method was tied to a kind of corporate situation, maybe I was exposed to some aspects of it and maybe put a lot of things under question for me in terms of what is acceptable when you are in a different culture and how you approach evangelism when you're dealing with a culture that is very different. Do you take advantage of certain cultural things? Koreans have a very particular group type mentality, and it's very easy to take advantage, especially in a religious context, of this type of group think. For example, first I want to say Korean people in general are like highly educated people. That being said, because a lot of the issues pertaining to the occupation by the Japanese and the Korean War, and it was just a very difficult situation in Korea after they were rebuilding it after the 50s, people kind of do things in groups. And so any type of individuality is kind of just cut back in. You're not encouraged to be different or even artistic. You're kind of encouraged to do everything as a unit. And so even if that unit disagrees with maybe the leader, they won't say anything because there's also a very strict hierarchy in terms of age, parental status. Any type of authority figure will always win. So a pastor or a teacher, which is highly respected there, or any religious leader can very easily make a group do something or persuade them to get baptized.
If at an individual level, you do not agree with the leader.
Absolutely.
You don't talk back to him.
Absolutely. So you have a lot of dissent. You have people who maybe don't understand why, but because they're being coerced to do something, they're going to do it to save face, to keep a certain type of cordial.
And how would the evangelism take advantage of this cultural thing?
Well, maybe some interesting things that I noticed was that maybe some of these tactics were used on the Korean students that I had in terms of camps that were set up. So there would be 2 camps a year, a summer and a winter camp, and they were advertised as being English camps, English immersion camps in the mountains, when in fact they were type of evangelist meetings that were set up. So the students would go to these camps thinking that they were going to do maybe secular type of activities, but when they got there, they would do activities in English, but they would be religious. They would be reading through kind of like Sabbath school lessons from 6 in the morning to night.
From 6 in the morning.
Well, they would make us wake up early. Yeah, so it was.
Okay. Let me ask you this: is this another thing pertaining to the Korean culture, or is just a cultic way of doing things? Because it scares me.
I think this particularly is a very Korean. Time-oriented, organized, structural thing. I see what you're saying, and it could be, but to be honest, it is a very Korean thing that I experienced. Even when I went to other activities, secular things, there were always a very rigid type of schedule. But that was kind of something that would happen, and then they would have these evangelism meetings with people like Mark Finley, and then they would have, of course, baptisms afterwards. And
after
it was
3 days?
After 2.5 days, and then of course you would have a lot of people getting baptized who had no clue that they were even going to go to a religious event. I don't want to say that the whole institution is bad.
Okay, let me ask you this. I know Mark Finley is very proficient in evangelism, good communicator. But how can one be expected to understand the whole range of theological issues of Seventh-day Adventism in 2.5 days?
Well, I think
how can anybody take such a rash decision to change theology and church and everything in 2.5 days?
I think this situation, we can draw a parallel with what happens in the United States because it's not that different. I think teaching people how to think independently and to research on their own and maybe to come to a conclusion to be a Christian later down the line is not the way to go. A lot of times it's a numbers game and you report success in terms of how many baptisms you have, when in fact that's not an indicator of somebody's true convictions. Because a lot of times you have maybe an emotional approach. You go to meetings and you know the equation where the world is bad, and then you see a lot of scary images, and then it's only going to get worse, and then Jesus is here to help you, and then he's coming back.
This is cultic, after all.
Well, yeah, that's kind of the method that everybody uses, and I think these type of evangelistic series kind of take advantage of people's emotional states, and people will, people will become baptized, but it's kind of based on the spot emotional thing, which personally I did this when I was 16 and I was drawn into an emotional type of Nets 2000 something when I got back. So I can sympathize and understand, but then afterwards you realize, first of all, miraculous things don't happen every day. So you're told your miracle stories are like a big part of this, and then you realize, well, this doesn't happen.
Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I want to ask you 3 questions. Okay. First of all, you talked about numbers. How many Seventh-day Adventists are there in Korea, South Korea?
I think the last time I checked, that there were about 180,000 baptized members.
And how many do you think are for real?
And this is tricky, and I know that this would probably make a lot of people upset, and I don't want to just drop numbers, but I definitely just speculating from my experience of the retention rate being 10 to 15, maybe 20% of people who get baptized. Like I've experienced this. I would question that number. I don't know what it actually is, but I think we have to be very careful when we look at numbers because the reality is very different.
Yeah, my second question was about the retention rate. You already answered. My last question of the 3 is how about miracles? What kind of miracles were you been talked about and they told other people about?
Well, I think the Mark Finley type miracles, I think we all know they usually happen in the Soviet Union or Africa. Right after, or, and so I'm not saying that they didn't happen, and I'm not trying to criticize, but sometimes even I would be, at that time when I was I had different, I felt differently about miracles.
Ontologically,
extreme.
Ontologically you cannot check, of course.
You can't.
The question is, how ethical is making use of miracles that nobody can check to prove something else that nobody can check? Okay.
There's a lot of parts of this question to answer. If you are presenting, if you are teaching possible future followers how to research on their own and posing questions to them and forming them into individuals that will have an interest to further do research, and then you present true story situations of people whose lives have improved. I don't think that there's anything wrong with that if it goes hand in hand, but I feel like oftentimes it's the extraordinary things, and this is not just Adventism, this is mostly Protestant, even Catholicism. It's not very exciting when you don't have some exciting thing happening. And I think what's unethical about that is that you create certain expectations in people. I know because I experienced it. I thought if I put myself in a situation, God will take care of everything, bad things won't happen, like he'll make out a way for everything to work out and things. And I've seen that not happen. And so you kind of are like questioning, well, wait a minute, hold on. And many times people take a lot of mundane miracles, like for example, oh, I was late for work and I prayed like, God, please let the bus come on time, and it came, and God showed me his love that day. And then you read a book about, that book about today we regret to inform you that you will be killed with your families. And hundreds of Adventists slaughtered in
a
the
few
church.
hundreds of Adventists.
And you say, well, God provided me with a miracle to catch my bus, but let these really innocent people in Africa get brutally
but the
slaughtered.
pastor didn't lie, and this is the most important thing.
And the problem is it creates a conflict, because I'm not saying that God doesn't do miracles. I'm saying when you look at it critically, there's a lot of miracles that aren't happening to save people's lives, and a lot of little miracles that, you know, I don't know. And it creates a conflict, and a lot of people will see this and say, well, that's a very strange God who doesn't care about life, human life, but he cares about, you know, you eating organic foods or whatever.
Or catching the bus or something like that. And did you expect miracles to happen to you when you went to Korea?
I personally didn't expect something.
But you heard about miracles over there?
It was a method that was used to attract people, which was just like the methods used in the other churches there, and just as it is used here, you know. So that was a little bit concerning, because there wasn't a lot of content. So you have a lot of baptisms, you have a lot of people coming in, and then when you talk about content-related things, there's really nothing to work with, and then they just wither away. So that's why I think it's kind of dangerous. To have it solely based on that.
Yeah, this is true. And I noticed something in camp meetings. They tell children a lot of miraculous stories.
Right.
And they expect their life to be just a series of miracles, because this is what faith is all about. And they are disappointed, and they lose faith.
Right.
Totally. So let's move on. Okay. Tell us more about your experience as a teacher there, and how did you relate to people and to your colleagues? And let's focus on ethics, because this is the question.
Okay.
I don't want to criticize your former colleagues, your experience, but anyway, let's say what was ethical, what was unethical, for the sake of truth.
Okay.
Not for anything else.
I think just as a general statement, I would say my experience interacting with people was very enriching. These students that I had, they were just amazing. I think teachers were really respected there, which is nice, because here it's not the case. And they're just very well behaved. For me, it was really interesting going and working with all Adventist teachers, because I went to public school all my life. I went to Catholic school for university. I'd never been in an Adventist setting outside of church. So to walk into a situation where everybody, you feel like you're in Adventist college, and it was a little bit like of a culture shock for me.
Culture shock, why?
It was really interesting because...
To better, or maybe the reverse of it?
You know, I kind of, and again, not to be critical, but I feel like there's a lot of keeping a certain type of face in public, and kind of maybe not revealing information because you might be judged by maybe what your interests are, your hobbies, or I'm personally not one of those clap your hands like hallelujah people. I'm more inward in terms of spiritual things. So it was maybe a little bit difficult to relate to kind of the general attitude that people had. But the truth is...
And was that attitude genuine, or just being
I can say that for a lot of people it was. There were many people who were there for the right reasons, but at the same time, because it was a job and it paid fairly well, you had the opposite there. You had a lot of, I have to go to church, I have to teach my religion class, I have to do these things, but I do my own thing on my own time, and I just have to keep the appearance of, you know,
being
a person that I'm, a lot of I don't do and I don't do. It comes down to, what do you do? I don't do this. I don't like this.
For instance,
like this.
What?
You know, like if you're talking to people, what you like to watch, or musical styles, or even in terms of how you, if you like philosophy, or if you like books, or, you know, it just, I felt for the first time in my life I had to be careful to, you know, I don't know how people were judging me. But it was interesting, and once you get to work with people more and you get to know them better, they let down their guard, and they tell you that this is how they were brought up, and this is just kind of how you protect yourself from rumors or whatever.
So faking it.
Unfortunately, basically. And we do that here too. That's not something that doesn't exist here. in the
How
church.
about Koreans?
Everywhere.
Did they fake it too, or they were just genuine in their decision to follow the Seventh-day Adventist theology?
There are many different groups of Koreans that I interacted with, and in terms of their kindness, they are incredibly genuine, and their respectfulness, wonderful, wonderful people. I think sometimes there was some confusion because there were some type of cultural conflicts, their culture and our culture. Some of it maybe was related to food. They'd always been brought up eating certain types of food, and all of a sudden we were coming in and saying, this food isn't good, this food isn't good.
Like seafood?
Okay, for seafood, for example, and a lot of times we didn't understand that some of the things they eat are due to the fact that they have a very particular history of shortages of food, and there's certain things that they have always done, and we have to kind of respect that. We can't just kind of come and think we can make away with their culture.
Okay, you're just trying to impose on them our diet, or making so silent compromises with their culture?
I'll give you an example of a situation I was in. I had a student, and this is the first time I talk about this live, but I had a student, and he was the head of a bank. He was a very nice man, and he invited me and some more students to the nicest restaurant in the small town. I moved in many places, but in the small town, he made reservations 2 months ahead of time. He really wanted to show off his culture, and it was very nice. And I went to the restaurant with my other students, and we sat down, and I noticed that I wasn't getting a menu, and I realized he had already ordered the food for me. And then when the food came out, it was raw slabs of pork, and it was just rolled up. And I realized that they'll be cooking it in front of us. I also realized that it was the most expensive thing on the menu. And at that time, I was so nervous. I'd never eaten pork before, and I was like, I have to make a decision. Do I say, I'm sorry, I don't eat pork? If I do, I will totally disrespect. Like, this man has gone out of his way to show me his culture and be kind to me. Or I can just eat it and be thankful. And I mean, I chose to eat it and respect the culture. Maybe somebody else would have done something else. But I've seen situations where we go into their culture and we say, nope, I don't do this, I don't eat this, I'm not doing this. And for them, respect is a really big issue.
Okay, let me ask you a question. Do you think that you were compromising?
No.
No. So you think that you acted out like Jesus would do? Or maybe you compromised your secular humanism philosophy?
When I came back, I remember calling my mom, and I was really conflicted, like, did I do something wrong? And the more I thought about it, the reaction in that person's face, if I would have disrespected him in front of the other students too, it's for me, it's a no-brainer. Like, I feel like I did the right thing. I don't know if everybody else agrees with me. I don't want to say that Jesus would have done this, but I personally feel like
if I asked you,
I'm happy that
would
I
have
did
Jesus
that.
done it? What would you say?
I would hope that he would, that I would have respected this person's dignity, and I think that's what Jesus would promote. Again, I don't want to be putting words into.
It's I would say you were right. Okay, you did the right thing. This is my take. So, but let's move on. So you had a wonderful experience meeting people. Let's talk about those whom you managed to bring to Jesus, okay? Not to that kind of Jesus that would eat pork in order to, not to insult his guests, but the Seventh-day Adventist Jesus, okay? So you brought people to Jesus, to baptism. I'm first going to ask you something which really bothers me over here in the States, about the age of those baptized.
Okay. Well, just to backtrack a little bit, I don't take any type of responsibility for bringing people. I just say, for me, my role was teaching a religion class, participating in clubs
so
that
you taught religion.
I taught religion. I participated in weekend religious-related activities, but I refused to
to push people,
force anybody into getting baptized. So that's not what I did. But in terms of the age of baptism, and I also noticed the parallel with the United States is that I don't know if this is the norm here, but I've seen many maybe 7, 8-year-olds getting baptized in the United States.
It's not the norm, it's the tendency.
It is, I just recently started seeing it, and I started asking myself, like, is this, I don't know what the conference's stance on it is, but that was very much accepted in Korea, which was a little bit disturbing for me because it seemed like it was barely 6, 7, 8-year-old.
6, 7 years old.
And yes, and I saw like many, I would say in the hundreds of young children being baptized at camps when they were away from their families too. Many of them come from Buddhist families, so they're not from necessarily Christian families. This is a practice that I think, and not just done in Korea, but I just don't understand how this is something that is acceptable in our
ethical.
church.
Okay, we say, okay, children had to follow Jesus even at the cost of fighting their parents because Jesus said this and that, you know. I have come to bring sword, not peace. But the question is it ethical to baptize a child without his parents being aware and allowing him to get baptized? Because if he or she were baptized in the Jehovah's Witness camp or Mormon camp, we said it's very unethical because his or her parents didn't know. But is it ethical to baptize a child in the Seventh-day Adventist church? His or her parents being unaware of it?
I would take it even further. I think with the parents being aware or unaware, I don't think it's ethical to baptize children, period. Even if the parents are aware or unaware of it. And I think I base that on the fact that children at 7, 8, up until their early 20s, your brain is developing, and cognitively, I don't think that a 7-year-old is fully aware of the claims that they're making, the complexity of the things that they're saying. You hear a lot of generalized statements, like, Jesus died for me. That's great, but they don't understand the ramifications. And so I kind of think, in a way, you are taking advantage of children, tying them to an institution early on.
Just to fill out the numbers.
And I think a lot of it is not in any way done on purpose. Like, I don't think that there's a group of people thinking, how are we going to trick these people into getting baptized? I think a lot of people say, oh, this child is honest, and why not?
The Holy Spirit is touching.
Yeah, I don't think that there's a really like evil spirit trying to trick people, but I think to not understand that children are not capable, even me at 16, what I learned from 16 to 28, I feel like I'm even 20 to 20, I'm an entirely different person, exposed to different things, and sometimes things aren't black and white, and you have to think about it. I'm not saying don't get baptized, I'm saying you have to be careful because children are easily impressed by certain things. They're scared into certain things. A lot of children, my experience, again, I was afraid of the end of the world. I was in Romania and I heard a sermon about the persecution when I was like 12. It ruined my life for like 5 years.
National Sunday Law.
National Sunday Law, waiting for people to knock on my door to take us away, my friends to turn against me. So as a child, I had this irrational fear that these things were going to happen to me. So I kind of think that we need to take that into account. What are we saying when we are okay with children getting baptized? We're saying we don't need somebody to make a rational decision. Them making a decision based on emotion is good because at least we have them on our side, we get them in our system, and that reduces their exposure to other things. So once we have them hooked, I don't want to make the connection with crack, but once we have them hooked in the system, it's easier to keep them there lifelong. Sure, that's nice if they stay their whole life there, but if they're their whole life in the system and they never once ask themselves why, I don't think you want anything.
Don't you think that it's unethical to limit children's exposure to culture? Because there are a lot of schools in the United States that are very safe for children, you know? They're very Seventh-day Adventists, not playing ball, not reading literature, blah, 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 not bad music. So you don't give them an exposure to science, to culture, to music, to education. Do we have a right to limit our children's exposure? I don't speak about bad things, about drugs, about violence, about sex. I speak exposure to culture, not to crazy things.
You know, that's a very interesting topic that I'm reading about now about children and kind of how you present marriage now in schools at the elementary level. If you decide to not talk about the fact that there are gay people in the world, and you pretend like it doesn't exist until they're 15 years old, they're going to come across it eventually, you know? So I think you're not doing a child any service to not show them that there are different configurations of things, that there are people who are different than we are or do things differently. And not necessarily to say, you know, this is evil and they're wrong, but just to expose them and give them a general understanding that they have to love people that are different than them.
Of course,
and then later on, they'll come to their own conclusions on if it is a positive or negative thing.
We came to sex, okay? And let me ask you this. I don't want you to gossip or to whistleblower or whatever, okay? But my question is, going into a foreign culture, into strange culture, not strange, another culture, And basically, there is this myth or maybe reality that Americans are perceived as superior to other culture, or maybe they think they are perceived like being superior, but they perceive themselves as superior. But I believe that many people in the world still look up at Americans. Does this give some people a leverage to take advantage of sexual opportunities in their mission?
To answer that, I think this perception is absolutely correct. And what I have seen and what I've had my students explain to me, that it is a type of affection towards American culture. It's not like they worship Americans, but they like our entertainment industry. They like how people look, and it's a very they look up to, in many respects, Americans, and that's a very nice thing. And you're absolutely correct. There's an American military base that's also in Seoul, and so you have a lot of thousands of guys, American guys, living there. I mean, and you can see the way that they take advantage of the fact that Korean girls look up to, and it's very interesting because it's mostly white males, not so much women. Women, because we have strong opinions, they don't really like strong women over there. So it's mostly directed towards the men. Yes, there is a lot of attention given to men, and I think in any situation, military, religious, whatever, people are taking advantage of that, and that's really unfortunate. Did I see it? Yeah, I saw a lot of it, and it was not okay, but it does happen.
Even teacher-student relationship?
Well, yeah,
and
there's always.
I think this is unethical according to any standard in the world.
Well, the thing is, because the institution that I worked for was primarily a corporation, it was a school that generated a profit, and it also paid a very decent salary for people who were there. Calling it a mission field is maybe not the most accurate way to depict it, because you had genuine people there searching for meaning, and then you had people who saw it as an attractive opportunity to live abroad. And
could you give us just an approximate rate? So,
well, I couldn't make that assumption. I would say in the people that I interacted with, I had more than several say, I'm here for the money. I'm here because I couldn't find a job right out of college, and I'm not interested in being a missionary, but it's such an attractive opportunity. And that's why my ultimate conclusion about the idea of being a missionary is that the mission field in Korea is very different than the mission field in other countries, where there are missionaries who are doing this who are not making money, who are doing this because they really want to spread the gospel.
They are risking their lives.
They're risking their lives. Like in China, we would meet people from China, even people who would go back into North Korea. And I think the distinction needs to be made, because these people are really, truly putting everything on the line. There's no profit to be made. The situation I was in was a little bit different, because you're mixing religion with corporation, and it was a really unique...
mixed motivation.
You have a lot of people coming for very different reasons. Some people wanted to get married. A lot of people retired from the United States, didn't have family.
So it's about mixed motivation. People come, go to Korea to pick on a career or to make a living. And there are also people who genuinely go over there to find purpose in life and to do something to make a difference. Okay, tell me about the second category. You know, I don't want to be too critical. I like to to add some positive scope on the whole conversation. So you said you learned something, you matured, so you had disappointments. You got a little more skeptical on miracles, on typical mission stories. But on the other hand, you said you learned, you grew up, and you will never regret your 1 year spent in Korea. So what was the upside of your experience over there?
Well, when I was there, I had the opportunity to really meet a handful of people, mostly from Buddhist backgrounds, that became Christians, in the sense that when you think of what is the ideal situation, somebody who truly, the purpose in their life has changed and they really understand and they make a conscious choice to become a Christian. I got to experience some of those situations too and make some friendships there too. And I wondered, what was the difference between these people that had a genuine type of experience and then the people who never come back again after they get baptized and that we don't retain. And the conclusion was that these people had built long-term, genuine relationships with the missionaries that went there that were not based just on, oh, I'm here to convert you, so I have an interest in adding you to the number, but I'm here to be your friend. I want to learn about your culture, not judge your culture, be open with you, be honest with you, and those types of bonds were built, and those were the ones that resulted in these long-term
let me ask you a question.
In the church.
Were these bonds goal in itself for you, or just a mean to attain another purpose, that of indoctrinating them and making them Christians?
Well, on a personal level, I have a very different view in terms of indoctrination.
Okay, tell me your view. Tell me your view.
Well, okay, how do I explain it? I am not very interested in indoctrination. For me, is you have a set of lists of things that you believe, and you're transferring those to somebody else, and those people accept those things. I have no interest in that at all. No interest. If somebody comes into contact with me and we have a friendship, and 2 years later we get separated, and that person leaves the friendship thinking that there is a reason for them to continue investigating and learning on their own. I don't care if they go to church on Sunday or they're still eating what they're eating. Not that these things are unimportant. But I'm saying that's not the focus of it. The focus is like a lifelong interest in that person has something special. I want it too, because it makes life richer and it gives life a purpose. Not at a superficial level, but a real purpose.
So do you mean that you had something to learn from Buddhists?
From
Buddhists.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. What?
Absolutely. Well, I at that time was reflective in a certain way, but I've kind of learned that I need to take it easy sometimes. And I mean, it very much coincided with the idea of the Sabbath and me really realizing how great the Sabbath is.
So Buddha, or the Buddhists have to realize how great the Sabbath is?
Well, you know, you see a certain demeanor. I mean, I would say even I have a professor from UIC who is a Buddhist, and the positive things in her life that have come about by Buddhism has changed her life apparently. And when I see her, I'm inspired to take a step back and take control maybe of, maybe exercising a certain way or eating or being more conscious of certain things that don't conflict with my belief in Jesus. So of course, we always have something to learn. There's people whose lives have changed from different experiences.
How about ethics? Can a Buddhist teach ethic lessons to a Christian?
This is a tricky one because in terms of their understanding of objective reality, I think there's less of an interest in understanding or getting closer to that, what is objectively real, because there's this pluralist type attitude where the absolute doesn't really matter, it's a state of mind, etc. I personally am interested in understanding what is objectively real, and I think you can be closer to that and farther to that using different methods. So from that point of view, I don't find an alternative competing worldview that can help me better establish a foundation from which to build. Because I think if you don't believe in God, it's absurd to believe that there's some type of universal or purposeful way to live.
You're right.
You can think there is, but objectively you don't have a foundation for it. So, so from that perspective, I think we would have some disagreements on the foundation of our ethics, but I think they can be ethical people.
As behavior.
As behavior, absolutely.
As a respect for life and the well-being of other creatures. I mean, they could teach us some lessons in this respect, especially when you talk about respect for the animal life. For example, we have this kosher thing, don't eat this, don't eat that. But they have genuine respect for animal life, which we don't have.
Well, I think it's very interesting because with this recent McDonald's protest in Loma Linda, I was reading some article, I thought it was really funny that we stand up for these kinds of things, but we're not protesting when it comes to other types of violations where people are being violated in other ways, or
even animal cruelty.
Exactly.
Even animal cruelty. We don't stand up for this. We stand up for kosher food, okay, and for vegetarianism as a means to get holier than thou. This is our take. Okay, so tell us. I interrupted you. Tell us about your positive experience in Korea.
Okay.
So so building relationships.
Right.
Did you? I'm curious. It's Korean culture. It's very interesting to me, and Asian cultures are very interesting. Did you learn some? I asked you about Buddhism, but generally speaking, did you learn from things from Koreans, which you didn't learn over here in the United States or in Romania? From their culture, what is the strengths of their culture? What could we learn from their? So we go to them to teach them about Jesus, about our superiority, about our values. But what could we learn from them?
There are a lot of different things that I found fascinating. One that I particularly really found fascinating was the relationship that they have in terms of respect for one another. Being a teacher there is the ideal situation. Students, the respect that they accord people who are transferring knowledge, that is something that I feel in the United States is not respected at all. Somebody who is giving you something that you don't have, you just disregard them here. Or
if you are a corporate lawyer or a businessman, you are respected.
Exactly. You walk into a classroom here, and your head will hurt from what you see. So they have this general type of respect and this type of order, which I think is what brought them out of their economic crisis, because they were able to, I don't know the details, but with the IMF, like really restructure everything and come out because of a certain type of discipline and some austerity measures that
they were the only country I know that came up from the IMF restrictions and standards.
And this is very telling of the way that they live. They're not the type of people to throw away their money on things. They live pretty modest lives, and they love nature. That's something that I found fascinating. Sundays, you'd get on the train and it would be filled with senior citizens going hiking. They're all dressed the same with their hiking sticks. They have like a love for life, which I think we can learn a lot from, and they're active. They're active all the time. Also the way when they approach education, for example, education is number one in Korea.
Because it is in the States too.
That it is number one in the United States?
With Koreans.
Oh,
with
okay.
Koreans,
I don't want to make generalizations because the situations are different here, but because the nature of the market is so competitive, they don't really have labor unions, corporations. If you don't want to work 90 hours, they can kick you out and replace you with another person. So you have to be as attractive a candidate as possible because they can replace you anytime. So education is a very high standard. Also being well-rounded in terms of music and sports, and children aren't sitting at home watching television. They play video games, but they also are well-rounded. You have to be there. Those are some main ones. Also hospitality.
But you mentioned there is a downside of this collectivism. which is basically that individualism is not very much encouraged in Korea.
Right. Yeah, unfortunately, I think that's due to their history of survival, as they did as in a family unit. I mean, in China, they had a similar type situation, but their unit is the immediate family unit. In Korea, it's kind of the community. So you see even apartment buildings are exactly the same on the inside. So you'll have one building with 100 units, and they won't be different. There won't be luxury ones and then smaller ones. All the units are exactly the same because you want to have a type of non-competitive, collective community, and to not have envy or whatever.
Do they have skepticism and nihilism like in the West? Or
you know, because it is, they have a very high Christian population. The comparisons with Japan are startling. Like, they have a high rate of suicide, but it's mostly tied to high school graduation exams, and if students don't do well, many students commit suicide. In Japan, I think Japan and Russia are like the two highest in suicide in the world. Their suicide numbers, which are insane, are stemmed in this type of belief of nothingness based in they're not a Christian culture, and they don't have another justification to give themselves meaning. If you do a lot of research online, they have suicide clubs, and so this is a very different approach. Koreans tend to have a more positive, even their president is a Christian. Christianity is very much promoted in the country.
So if there is suicide, it's because the expectation is too high.
It's a different,
not because there is no belief in life.
And it's not that I don't know every case. Obviously, there's variations, but you know, when you do the research, you see that it comes from a very different place. One is more of, I'm not going to find a job, I disappointed my family. In Japan, it's very much like there is nothing. Their culture is a little bit different, and people live very individualized, compartmentalized lives, and they don't interact in the same way that Koreans do. There's a slight difference.
Yeah, I think their culture is a little bit nihilistic by tradition in Japan. So let me go back to the issue of evangelism and of mission. You spoke about building relationships, you know, because forget about theology, forget about indoctrinations.
Yeah, I would
not
say
that
forget
you
about
do not believe in God, but let me ask you this: you do not you believe in God, okay? You are Seventh-day Adventist. You believe that the Bible is meaningful, yeah, if not exactly, literally. True in every respect, as far as I know. But when you befriend a person, do you try to prompt any change in her belief system, or in values, or in attitudes, or do you just let it flow naturally? You know, and what is the area of change you'd like to see in your friends, or maybe you also change in turn, you know, following this relationship. So what is your view on this relationship evangelism? What is your philosophy? Just try to define it a little more explicitly.
Okay. So personally, since I was obsessed with religion from the time I was a teenager, I experienced all of these different types of scenarios. And if you ask anybody who knew me when I was like 16 to 20, they would say I was insane. Every opportunity that I had to talk to somebody about Jesus, if I sat on a bench and I would pray, like, God, please bring somebody to sit next to me so I can talk about Jesus. Like, that's how I was. Every opportunity I had, I would talk about it. I would put my opinion out there. I would give you the logical argument about why this doesn't make sense, but look at my argument. They correspond. It makes sense. It's great. I made 0 friends doing this. Like, maybe I made friends, but they were like, you need to tone it down because we don't care. Like, you're obnoxious. And I've experienced that too with other people trying to convert me because I thought, time is running out. I need to get to as many people as possible. I don't have time to become friends with them.
Because it's around the corner.
Right. And so I didn't want to invest in people. But with time passing, and I met a really interesting person from Germany, a Romanian person who's Seventh-day Adventist, and we talked, and he told me that he doesn't tell any of his friends that he's Seventh-day Adventist. They don't know what religion he is. He just is himself around them, and eventually they just ask maybe if they see something different, if he says something, they'll ask him to elaborate. And that friendship bond can still exist, and they already like you as a person, so they're more open to taking what you have to say into account and thinking about them. When somebody attacks you off the street and I have to share some good news, you're not really open to hearing what they have to say, especially if you're busy, you know. But I think if you have relationships with people and they bring new information to you, you're much more open, and if you know that person has integrity or whatever, you're much more open to listening to what they have to say. And I think you get to building these bonds. It takes a lot more time, but I feel like personally it's been more effective in my friends now. They all know what my opinion is about everything. And maybe it took a couple of years for me to tell them, you know, but they all know what I believe, if they agree or disagree, but they know, and they're still my friend. But I think my life would have been very different if I'd have continued in this attacking, aggressive
But do you still have a theological agenda? Because some people might agree with you. Yes, we shouldn't be so aggressive. We should just slow down. But the theological agenda is the same. I mean, bringing them on our side. So do you still have a theological agenda?
My theological agenda, the idea of bringing them on our side. Well, what does our side mean? For me personally,
good question.
Our side for me comes down to, is there a purpose to life? And if the answer is yes, then I think you can build from there. If there is a purpose to life, or if there is a God, then there is a purpose. If there's a purpose, there's certain things that are better than others. So you can just start building a system. I don't have any other type of agenda. For me, I don't know, personally, I'm not really interested in somebody, if you understand the, what do you call it, the sanctuary or whatever.
Sanctuary,
you know,
sanctuary,
I'm not
2,300 days, blah, blah, blah.
Not that these things are unimportant, but a lot of them are also up in the air in terms of interpretation. I said it, like maybe people disagree with me, but I kind of feel like the certainty that I thought there was in terms of how I understood things is not exactly the same anymore. And I also have to always read and re-understand and build upon my system. I don't want to transfer something to somebody that and say that it is the absolute truth and I absolutely have understood it, when in fact I'm also trying to get closer to what the absolute truth is. So my purpose is sparking an interest in somebody else and maybe sparking this sense of my life has a purpose. And if there is no God, maybe the intellectually honest conclusion is that pretending that there's a purpose is not intellectually the honest thing to do. That's like the bottom line. Does life have purpose, or does life not have purpose? And I think just asking these questions with people, you'll get a lot farther than you think. And the theological stuff will follow. But if you start with that stuff, I don't know. For me, it has not been effective.
Let me go back to it. So basically, you say, if there is God, okay, let me go the other way around. If there is purpose in life, it should be defined by God, Or if there is absolute good and absolute truth and absolute justice, then God has to exist, If God does not exist, there is no purpose in life, there is no objective truth, there is no objective good and evil.
And you'll have many atheists try to make an argument based on utilitarian reasons or based on just their personal, well, I create meaning for myself. And that's all nice and well. But at the end of the day, they have no foundation for those things. And they're still absurd conclusions to come to. So I think that I'm not trying to create God because I want a purpose. I believe that there are universals. Therefore, I believe that there is a God.
There is a God because there are universal truths and values.
Right.
So I believe, I believe that we cannot prove the existence of God.
Right.
We cannot disprove it either. But I believe this is the main argument for God. And basically, I don't want to be utilitarian, like, okay, you have to believe in God in order to believe in a purpose in life. But basically, I would say, as long as I believe in purpose and in objective truth and objective moral values, I have no reason to say that I do not believe in God. I implicitly believe in God. And I believe this is the 21st century way to go in mission. I agree with you 100% on this issue. And so let me ask another question. If you believe that believing in God implies believing in absolute values, and the vice versa, do you believe that you have, there are still questions about ontological or epistemological issues like scientific questions, evolution, the purpose of killing so many species, during the evolution of man. Do you believe that such data and such information still pose uncomfortable questions to a believer?
Oh, yeah, they definitely do.
What do you do about them?
Well, yeah, that's a very, very good point. I think that parallel to believing that there's a purpose in life, I'll set it up this way. I believe that there's an objective reality that we can reach using the scientific method. I believe that, medicine works that way. If I didn't believe that, I wouldn't go to the doctor and take medicine. It's real.
Good point.
Pregnant women are pregnant. It's not just a matter of perception. So this type of objective reality exists. So I think that when you don't let science reveal certain truths, I think that conflicts with the idea of objective reality. I think science is the vehicle to understanding objective reality. So if science doesn't reflect something that I held to be true before, based on the fact that I believe in objective reality and I believe we can reach it through the scientific method, I kind of have to reevaluate those ideas that I had before and understand that I don't fully understand the world in terms of science, in terms of mathematics, and I have to be open to redefining how I understand the world. So I believe they go hand in hand. You can't believe in things being real without understanding that science reveals to us what these things are.
Does this not generate a tension between your beliefs and objective reality?
It totally is a tension because when you're brought up having a certain narrative told to you. So we're told where we come from, what we're supposed to do, where we're going, and all of the steps in the way. I already know. If somebody tells me, I can tell them the history of the world and what's going to happen. When one little piece of that puzzle is moved, for some people, it destroys their entire foundation and purpose. I've experienced this where I'm like, wow, I have to rethink everything, and it's a painful process.
Did you lose your faith anytime in your life? It's just a personal question, okay?
If I said that I didn't, I would be lying. I think for me it was the best thing to at one point lose my faith because I said, what I have been thinking up until now, I didn't understand correctly. I have to start from the beginning. And now I feel like since I had to go back and start over again, I feel much more at peace. I feel like free, like real freedom.
And better grounded in faith.
Yes, even. Definitely. I'm not uprooted. If you throw an argument to me about something, my whole world doesn't shatter if I don't understand it. So I'm glad for that moment when I did temporarily struggle.
I want to ask you two questions. First, what do you believe about people who never doubt? People strong in faith, you know what I mean?
Right.
They never doubt. They believe what they believe in, and they never shake, never doubt, just never look around, basically. Do you believe they have a stronger faith than you do, or that just their faith is not, it's not sane, it's not sound? Not sound.
This is an interesting question. I don't want to make a generalization. There are people that have gone through certain circumstances where their survival depended on them having a certain type of faith. Psychologically, it kept them sane through certain instances. I am not in any position to say anything about those people. But if I look at myself, somebody my age, who just takes everything at face value and doesn't doubt, I would say that those people genuinely tend to not be very interested in what's going on in the world around them. Because if you just start poking and probing and asking questions, they're stuck with, well, that's what I believe. I can't explain it to you, but that's what I believe. And that's kind of not acceptable. I mean, it's not good.
My second question is, what do you think about religious leaders like me? Okay, whatever. I'm not a very important leader, but pastors, teachers, elders, who, in order to protect faith, to keep it safe, they disinform people about scientific issues. Like you spoke about the narrative, okay, from the beginning of the world through the National Sunday Law. This is our narrative. Yeah?
Right.
Okay. What do you think about those people who are trying to make a case for this worldview? And they basically deceive people about the scientific data and information?
Well, I think one of the things that's interesting is that many people are not equipped. Sometimes we think, oh, well, they're purposely deceiving people. I think many people don't understand. I'm not a big science person, so for me also it's a struggle to understand. And I think that the way that leaders are, the education that they're given doesn't provide that for them. So I think I don't want to blame anybody. If they're consciously, if they are not genuine, if they believe one thing, but in order to maintain order, are doing something else, again, the church is, I'm sorry, it is kind of like a corporate structure where maintaining order is kind of what it's supposed to do. And that's why I'm kind of skeptical when it comes to institutionalized religion, because I know how it works. That's disingenuous.
I came across a catchphrase in Adventist Today: evangelism industrial complex. What do you think about this?
Yeah, not to be negative, I think we fall into using certain equations. And I'm pretty sure that if you look at like plans for evangelistic series, they use certain methods that have proven it in time to produce yield results or whatever. So yeah, there's definitely a type of equation that's applied to it that non-Christians use in their speeches too, and the way that they present information. So yeah, I think we're also susceptible to using those methods.
So it's interesting because you told us you went to Korea in order to escape the corporate culture. And here you come across corporate culture in mission. Okay, so, but it's my understanding that you believe in mission.
Right, absolutely.
You just do not believe in the corporate kind of mission.
Right.
Basically, Jesus didn't found a corporation. He just sent his disciples to teach everybody to what he had taught them. And so I'm going to ask you another question. It's the last question tonight. Based on your experience in South Korea, and you have a very rich experience. You started at 16 years old, baptized at Mark Finlay's net, whatever that was, okay, whatever year it was, and then you were scared into the church because of the National Sunday Law and so, and still I know I met two of your best friends. They are both Catholics. They are both French. So a double offense for American standards, Catholic and French. Yeah?
Right.
But they're very good friends of yours. What is your relationship as far as religion and theology is concerned with your friends, with your Catholic friends?
That's a very interesting question. I do have one friend who I see on a more regular basis, and we'll be seeing each other soon. I think the fact that she spent time with my family and saw that, in my family personally, we like to talk. We'll come home from church and we'll talk about ideas, what happened at Sabbath school, this comment, what do you think? And I think that for somebody like her, it was very attractive to see that, well, just because the pastor said it doesn't mean that it's true. We can say maybe we don't agree and then look at Bible verses and do our own research. And I know on this one particular friend, even though she is a devout Catholic, she has a sympathy, not a sympathy, like she sympathizes with this form of personal responsibility, a personal faith, not just a corporate religion that you belong to. And so I feel that maybe that has made an impression on her life. She enjoys participating, even on the Friday night youth meetings. When she comes, she loves talking.
Yeah.
She loves participating. So I think the fact that we have a very strong relationship makes it easier for her to ask us questions. She participates, and she sees that we're like normal people. We're not trying to convert her. We just like to have a dialogue.
But you know, we have a mission task as a church, as a corporate church. We have to print a certain number of the Great Controversy.
Okay.
And as a good Seventh Adventist, you have to give her a copy of the Great Controversy. What would you feel like for your friend to read certain segments of the Great Controversy, at least?
Asking me very
I was about to say
questions.
certain chapters, but it's not just one chapter or another, you know?
This might get me in a lot of trouble, but I think that if you start off with that, you will have that person think that you're a weirdo. And I'm going to say it that way. That's not the focus of what we believe.
You're not going to give her a copy of the Great Controversy?
You know, unfortunately, I actually had a very interesting Facebook discussion today related to religion, and I think that all people have to do is Google SDA or Wikipedia SDA, and all of that, sometimes negative information is available for them on the internet, so they already come to the table with an understanding of Seventh-day Adventism that isn't necessarily accurate. It's very much skewed and very much formed by former Seventh-day Adventists who don't like the religion. So I think to focus on those things, not that they shouldn't be talked about, but that's not the main focus. There, you know, I would talk about, Ellen White, talk about her place historically in founding the church, what she did, and her importance in this role, and maybe an interpretation that she has. Steps to Christ, I think, is an excellent book for anybody to read.
Is that about ages?
I think it's a very interesting, in terms of just the narrative structure, that I found, you know, not that I sit in all the details about Jesus's birth with the details, and I don't take these things to be literal things, but I think it is an interesting perspective to maybe enrich your understanding
Patriarchs
about
and Prophets. So I'm asking a question. I'm pressing God. So, did you read Patriarchs and Prophets?
You know, unfortunately, I have not gotten to that one.
How about Testimonies to the Church?
Oh no, please don't ask me.
Okay, good.
I've read Messages to Young People and some.
It's because, you know, I think one of the most important things to us as a church is to decide what to do with Ellen G. White in the future.
Right.
I am not on the side of those who want her just trashed away. You know? But I believe we should change our theological understanding of Ellen G. White.
And even critics of Ellen G. White don't understand that a lot of her views reflected the views of the general population at that time. And so it wasn't something radically, I mean, some in terms of diet and whatever maybe were, but other ones that clearly science and medicine tell us are not necessarily true.
Of course. Like green tea, for instance.
Right, they fell in line with the views of most people of the time, and people can't discern that. That's kind of how they look at the Bible. Well, God allowed all these people to get killed. Well, you don't get the point. That's not necessarily the point. That's what was happening everywhere in all the empires. It reflected the times. So I think if you build a friendship with somebody and you can set a foundation for, well, you know, we have to take the context into consideration. You can't just throw a book at somebody because you can come out of the Great Controversy with a lot of fear, a lot of confusion. You have to kind of set the groundwork first, and then then pass on the literature.
So, Lorelei, I think we have been talking for over 1 hour.
Oh, okay.
I believe people, those listening to us, are not bored. I want to thank you not only for coming over here tonight, but I'd like to thank you for being in the church, for being with us. We so badly need people like you in our church. I'm not very happy with the new tendencies in the church, and I don't think we need to go back to the 19th century to be good Seventh-day Adventists. I believe that our eschatological scheme trapped us. Because you know what? What's the problem? When you believe what we believe about the future, you don't feel like you need to change, you know? Because the end is so near. You just have to stay as you are in order to meet the requirements of the second coming. So we need to understand that we have to change as a church. And the survivors of the church as a meaningful institution. It depends on this. And I'm very happy that you and other people, you know, are still with us in the church. It makes me be optimistic about the future.
Well, I have to say that if I didn't feel like welcome in my church, because there are places I haven't felt welcome.
There are a lot of places.
Well, the truth is that
wouldn't welcome you.
In terms of friendship ministry, I feel like friendship is based on being honest, being able to express your opinions, being able to have maybe conflict of ideas, and I feel like
to be yourself.
To be yourself, and I think that the church where I participate allows me to be myself. I don't have to pretend to be something I'm not. So for me, I feel privileged to be able to be in this church. So.
Oh, thank you very much. I feel privileged to be in a church with people like you too.
Thank you.
I'm very honest about it. Thank you very much for your support by just listening to us. And I think you are in agreement with me if I invite Lorelei to come back and to give us another piece of her very precious and very spare time. By the way, so you had a conversation on your Facebook account. Yeah?
Oh dear, no.
Okay, no, okay, good. I'm stopping. Okay, thank you very much, and we'll see you again in the same setting. Goodbye.